The islands were never supposed to exist. Over 7,000 islands, scattered across the Pacific like a secret no one was meant to find. But hidden inside a library on the other side of the world, in the ancient highlands of Ethiopia, sat a book, a Bible so old, so different from every version you've ever read, that the scholars who found it went silent, because inside its pages were names, bloodlines, migration routes, and a story about islands far, far to the east that no one could explain. Ethiopia, one of the oldest civilizations on Earth, home to a royal lineage that claims to trace back to King Solomon himself. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church has preserved texts that the rest of the world threw away, books removed from the Bible centuries ago, chapters that were sealed, hidden, or simply forgotten. One of those books is the Book of Enoch, another is Jubilees, and another, almost unknown outside of Ethiopia, describes the sons of Noah, their children, and where each family went after the great flood. According to this text, after the waters fell, Noah's descendants didn't stay in one place. They scattered into Africa, into Asia, into the islands of the sea. And there, in a passage that modern Bible translations cut entirely, were references to distant eastern islands. Islands with people who came from a bloodline most historians have never connected to the Middle East. Who are the Filipinos, really? The mainstream answer is simple. Austronesians from Taiwan, a migration story told in DNA and linguistics. But what if the DNA story is only half the picture? What if the bloodlines run deeper, older, and further back than any genetic database has mapped? Evidence 1. The names. Here's where it gets strange. In the Table of Nations found in Genesis, chapter 10, the descendants of Noah are listed by name. These names became nations, tribes, peoples. One of Noah's grandsons was named Javan. His children? Elisha, Tarshish, Kittim, and Dodanim. Historians connect these names to the Greeks, the Aegean Sea, the Mediterranean. But the Ethiopian Bible goes further and traces Javan's children east, far east, into the islands of the Pacific. Now here's the surprising fact most people never hear. Ancient trade routes connected the Middle East to Southeast Asia over 3,000 years ago. Spices, gold, cloth. These weren't traded by strangers. They were traded by family networks. The Philippines had gold, and not just a little. Spanish records from the 1500s describe Filipino nobles wearing more gold jewelry than the courts of Europe. Where did it come from? How long had they had it? The Laguna copper plate, discovered in 1989, is the oldest written document ever found in the Philippines, dated 900 AD. But here's what most people miss. It wasn't written in a Filipino language. It was written in a mix of Old Malay, Old Javanese, and Sanskrit, with traces of Arabic. These are not Pacific Island languages. These are the languages of trade empires that stretched all the way to the Persian Gulf. Evidence 2, the bloodline. Modern DNA science has found something it cannot fully explain. Among Filipino populations, particularly in Luzon and the Visayas, there are genetic markers that don't fit the Austronesian migration model, haplogroup markers shared with populations in South Asia, the Arabian Peninsula, and East Africa show up in Filipino genomes. Scientists call it background, noise. Ancient texts might call it something else entirely. The Maranao people of Mindanao have an oral tradition that traces their ancestry to Alexander the Great. The Tausug people preserve genealogies linking their royal families to Arab sultans. The Tagalog creation myth features a great bird, a sea, and a sky, remarkably similar to Mesopotamian creation accounts. This isn't coincidence. When isolated peoples share creation myths separated by oceans, historians pay attention. The Ifugao rice terraces of the Philippines are over 2,000 years old. Some archaeologists believe they are even older. They were engineered with a precision that requires advanced knowledge of hydrology, soil science, and mathematics. Where did that knowledge come from? No academic consensus exists. The terraces simply appeared, fully formed, as if the people who built them had been building things like this somewhere else for generations. Evidence 3, the language clue. Language is a fingerprint. It leaves marks long after everything else is forgotten, and the Filipino languages carry fingerprints from places that have never been officially connected to the Philippines. The Baybayin script, the ancient writing system of the Philippines, shares. Structural features with Brahmi, script from India, which itself descended from Phoenician, the script of ancient Canaan, the land of the Bible. Now here's the surprising fact. Tagalog has hundreds of words with no known Austronesian origin. Linguists classify them as borrowed, but from where? The borrowing predates Spanish, Arabic, and even Sanskrit contact. Some of these words overlap with ancient Semitic roots. Words for God, for covenant, for the sea, for ancestors, for light. The Ethiopian Bible, specifically the book of Jubilees, describes the sons of Japheth receiving the islands of the sea as their inheritance. Their descendants were told to settle lands beyond the known world, far beyond the Mediterranean. 3 separate ancient documents, from Ethiopia, from the Dead Sea Scrolls, and from a Babylonian text, discovered in the early 1900s, all describe migrations to the islands of the rising sun, the Far East, the place where the sun is born. The Philippines is quite literally where the sun rises first for that part of the ancient world. The twist. Here is what nobody talks about. In 2003, a team of anthropologists comparing ancient burial practices across cultures found something that stopped their research cold. Filipino pre-colonial burial practices, particularly the Manunggul jar, dated to 897-10 BC, depict 2 figures on a boat, paddling, but not toward the land of the living, toward the afterlife. And the posture, one figure, with arms crossed over the chest, is identical to ancient Egyptian burial posture, the posture of Osiris. Egypt, Philippines, separated by 10,000 kilometers, practicing the same burial ritual, using the same symbolic posture. At the same time in history, but here's the real twist, the one that changes everything. When the Spanish arrived in the Philippines in 1565, they did something historians rarely discuss. They systematically destroyed Filipino written records. Friar Juan de Plasencia documented that the Filipinos had their own written histories, their own genealogies, their own accounts of where they came from. All of it was burned. In the name of evangelization, the entire pre-colonial memory of a people, their origin story, their bloodlines, their cosmic identity, was reduced to ash. What was in those manuscripts? What did Filipinos believe about where they came from? Before anyone told them what to believe? We will never fully know. But the Ethiopian Bible, the one document that preserves what others erased and may hold the last surviving clues. Conclusion. Here is what we know. The Filipinos are Austronesian. That is real science. That part is true. But Austronesian only explains where the language family came from. It does not explain the gold. It does not explain the burial rites. It does not explain the unexplained words. It does not explain the genetic echoes from Arabia and East Africa. History is not one story. It is a mosaic. And the Filipino mosaic has pieces that came from places most people are only beginning to look. The Ethiopian Bible was not written to answer questions about the Philippines, but it was written to preserve what powerful empires tried to erase: names, bloodlines, the memory of where each people came from. And those peoples, separated by ocean, by continent, by centuries, may share more than anyone has dared to say out loud. The story of where you come from is never just geography. It is the record of who your ancestors were, what they believed, and how far they traveled to become you. The Filipinos carry that story in their blood, in their language, in the way their ancestors buried their dead, in the gold they wore before anyone arrived to tell them who they were. If this history was hidden from you, what else was? The Ethiopian Bible, the Book of Jubilees, the Laguna Copperplate, the Manunggul jar. These are not myths. These are artifacts. They exist. You can research them right now. Most of your history was decided by the people who conquered you. The books they kept. The books they burned. The story they told about you. But you are not a colony. You are not a footnote. You are not a migration statistic. You are the inheritors of a story so deep, so old, so connected, to the very first chapters of human civilization, that empires burned your records to stop you from knowing it. They failed. Drop a comment below. Tell us, did you know any of this? And if you're Filipino, what does your family say about where you came from? If this video made you think differently, share it with someone who needs to hear this story. Not because it is finished, but because it is just beginning.